Sometimes I sit back and wonder how ordinary people used to survive on so little, yet somehow lived with far less stress than many people today. Older generations grew up in a completely different America, a world that younger people today can barely imagine. The farther we move into modern life, the more impossible ordinary life seems to become. There was a time in this country when one paycheck could support an entire family. A father could work a regular job. A mother could stay home raising children, and somehow the bills still got paid. Families were not rich, but many had enough to build a stable life, buy a modest home, raise children, and still believe the future would get better. Many young people today hear stories like that and almost think it sounds fictional. Back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, many families lived in small homes with one bathroom, one television, and one family car parked outside. Most fathers worked long hours in factories, construction sites, steel mills, railroads, farms, or local businesses. Mothers stretched every dollar as far as possible. Kids shared bedrooms, wore hand-me-down clothes, and played outside until dark without the world feeling dangerous every second. People were careful with money because they had to be. But life itself cost less. A loaf of bread cost pennies. Gas was cheap enough that families drove across town just to visit relatives. Rent, groceries, and basic necessities still felt within reach for ordinary workers. Life was simpler, smaller, slower, and somehow, despite having less, people felt more secure than they do today. The baby boomer generation grew up during years that demanded hard work, sacrifice, and resilience. Many of their parents had already survived the Great Depression and World War II, so children were raised to appreciate what they had and avoid wasting anything. People repaired broken appliances instead of throwing them away. Leftover food stayed on the table for the next meal. Families learned how to stretch every dollar because there was no guarantee life would always stay stable. Most neighborhoods were filled with modest homes, small front yards, and children running through the streets until sunset. Air conditioning was considered a luxury in many homes. Families sat on front porches during summer evenings, talking to neighbors while kids chased fireflies or rode bicycles up and down the block. People entertained themselves with simple things because simple things were all they had. Back then, many workers never became wealthy, but a regular job could still build a life. Factory workers, truck drivers, mechanics, carpenters, and office workers often managed to buy homes, support families, and retire with dignity after decades of work. A young couple could realistically dream about owning a small house someday without feeling like the entire system was working against them. There was also a stronger sense of patience during those years. People waited for letters in the mail, saved money before making purchases, and accepted that life took time. Today, everything feels rushed. People are expected to work faster, spend faster, respond faster, and somehow survive rising costs that never seem to slow down. The 1970s and 1980s, things slowly began changing. This generation grew up during the 1970s and 1980s, right in the middle of a changing America. Many still experienced the slower world their parents knew, but they also witnessed the beginning of modern consumer culture, rising corporate power, and the early stages of the digital age slowly entering everyday and by life. Generation X children were often called the latchkey generation. Many came home from school to empty houses because both parents were now working full-time just to maintain a middle-class lifestyle. Families were still surviving, but something had already started shifting financially. The idea of one income supporting an entire household was slowly becoming harder to reach. Even then, life still felt far more affordable than it does today. Teenagers worked summer jobs at grocery stores, gas stations, movie theaters, diners, and shopping malls, while earning enough money to buy a used car, help pay for college, or save for the future. Rent was lower. College tuition had not yet exploded into lifelong debt for millions of young people. A person working an ordinary job still had a realistic chance of building an independent life. This was also one of the last generations to experience childhood before the internet completely changed human behavior. Friends showed up at each other's houses unannounced. Phone calls happened on landlines. Weekends were spent at arcades, malls, concerts, skating rinks, or simply driving around town listening to music with friends. Life still felt physical back then. Real conversations, real places, real memories. By the time millennials came of age, life had already become far more expensive. This generation entered adulthood at the exact moment the world began changing faster than most people could keep up with. Many millennials were raised by parents who still believed in the old promise that hard work would eventually lead to stability. They were told to study hard, go to college, get a degree, find a good job, and life would slowly fall into place the same way it once had for earlier generations. But by the time many of them became adults, the ground underneath that promise had already started collapsing. College tuition exploded to levels previous generations could barely imagine. Young adults graduated carrying tens of thousands of dollars in student debt before even beginning their careers. Rent prices climbed higher every year. Housing costs rose faster than wages. Healthcare became more expensive. Good-paying jobs became harder to find, and many companies slowly replaced long-term stability with temporary contracts, part-time work, or jobs without meaningful benefits. At the same time, technology completely transformed everyday life. Millennials were the bridge generation between the old world and the digital world. They remember life before smartphones, social media, and constant internet connection. But they also became the first generation fully pulled into it. Many experienced the strange transition from playing outside as children to eventually spending large parts of adult life staring at screens for work, entertainment, communication, shopping, and social interaction. This generation also entered adulthood during major economic instability. The 2008 financial crisis shattered millions of lives almost overnight. Families lost homes, savings disappeared, businesses collapsed, and many young adults who had just entered the workforce suddenly found themselves competing for survival in an economy filled with uncertainty and fear. For many millennials, adulthood started with disappointment. A lot of them worked harder than previous generations expected to just maintain basic stability. Some delayed marriage, children, or buying homes because they simply could not afford it. Others moved back in with parents after college because rent prices became impossible to manage alone. Many worked multiple jobs while still struggling financially, despite doing everything society told them they were supposed to do. Social media also exploded during these years, and that changed human psychology in ways people still do not fully understand. Suddenly, millions of people began comparing their lives every single day to carefully edited versions of other people's success, beauty, relationships, vacations, and lifestyles. The pressure to appear successful became constant, and while technology made life more convenient, it also made life feel more exhausting. Work followed people home through emails and phones. News never stopped. Advertisements never stopped. Comparison never stopped. People became reachable every hour of the day, and slowly the line between personal life and work life almost disappeared completely. Many millennials grew up believing they would eventually reach the same level of security their parents once had. Instead, a large number of them entered a world where surviving itself started feeling harder every single year. For Generation Z, digital life became normal from the very beginning. This generation was born into a world already controlled by screens, algorithms, and constant digital connection. Unlike previous generations, many of them never experienced life before smartphones, social media, streaming platforms, and endless internet access. From childhood, technology became part of almost every moment of daily life. While anxiety, depression, loneliness, and emotional exhaustion had already become common parts of everyday conversation, this generation carries pressures earlier generations never faced. For many Gen Z children, the internet raised them as much as the world around them did. They grew up during a time of rising housing costs, school shootings, economic uncertainty, political division, social media addiction, and non-stop information overload. By the time many of them reach their teenage years, young ages, teenagers now grow up comparing themselves to millions of strangers online every single day. Beauty standards became harsher. Attention spans became shorter. Personal worth slowly became tied to followers, views, likes, and online validation. Even childhood itself feels different now. Many kids spend more time indoors with screens than outside with real human interaction. And financially, life feels more out of reach than ever. Many young adults today look at housing prices, rent, healthcare costs, groceries, gas, and education expenses, and honestly wonder how they will ever build a stable future. Some work full-time and still cannot afford independence. Others feel trapped living paycheck to paycheck before life has even truly started. The American dream that earlier generations once believed in now feels distant to many young people. A small home, financial stability, raising children, and retiring peacefully used to feel achievable for ordinary workers. Today, many people feel like they are running endlessly just to survive another month. And maybe that is why so many people feel exhausted now, not physically alone, but mentally, emotionally, and financially exhausted from trying to survive a world that keeps becoming more expensive, more demanding, and more disconnected from ordinary human life. Every generation had struggles, but this generation inherited a world moving faster than human beings were ever meant to live. For Generation Alpha, digital life did not slowly arrive over time. It was already waiting for them the moment they were born. Many of these children learned how to swipe a screen before they even learned how to write their names. Tablets became babysitters. Phones became pacifiers. Cartoons no longer came on once a day at a certain hour. Entertainment became endless, instant, and available every second of the day. Unlike earlier generations that still remember boredom, silence, or long afternoons outside, Generation Alpha is growing up in a world filled with non-stop stimulation. Algorithms now compete for children's attention before they are even old enough to understand what attention truly is. Some children spend more time watching other people live life online than experiencing life themselves. Playgrounds feel emptier, bike rides are rarer, family dinners are quieter. Many parents are exhausted from working longer hours just to survive modern life, while technology quietly fills the emotional gaps inside the home. Even childhood itself feels different now. Previous generations scraped knees climbing trees, knocked on friends' doors, built forts outside, and created memories away from cameras. Many children today are growing up surrounded by screens, notifications, advertisements, and endless digital noise. And perhaps the saddest part is this: a large number of Generation Alpha children may never fully understand what was lost, because they were born after the world had already changed. To them, this fast, disconnected, screen-controlled life may simply feel normal,